Imagine a night so silent that even the wind seems to hold its breath. You're standing near the banks of the Yalu River, that invisible divide between two worlds, China on one side, North Korea on the other. The darkness beyond the river is deeper than anything you've seen before. And then, faintly, from somewhere in that blackness comes a sound, a thin, trembling signal. It crackles, fades, returns again. A voice, mechanical and distant, counting numbers in an emotionless rhythm. For those who understand, this is no random broadcast. It's a whisper from the regime, a transmission coded in fear, duty, and secrecy. In North Korea, radio waves are not just invisible signals. They are instruments of control. Every home, every apartment, every school dormitory is equipped with a government radio. It's called the fixed receiver. You can turn the volume up or down, but you can't turn it off. It's tuned permanently to state frequencies, locked inside a casing sealed by the authorities. Break the seal and you disappear. The device hums quietly day and night, an omnipresent reminder that even silence belongs to the regime. Through it, the state speaks, delivering news of the supreme leader, revolutionary anthems and instructions for the masses. For the ordinary citizen, this soundscape is as constant as breathing. The broadcasts begin at dawn with songs glorifying Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un, voices that never age, echoing through generations. News bulletins follow, praising harvests that never happened, victories that were never won, and threats from enemies that never attacked. Between segments, children's choirs sing of loyalty, while a female announcer's voice, sharp, deliberate, rehearsed, narrates the illusion of perfection. But beyond the official frequencies in the static, something else exists. A forbidden layer of sound that only the brave, or the desperate, dare to seek. It's where the outside world lives. The BBC in Korean, Radio Free Asia, Voice of America, South Korea's KBS. To tune into them is to commit a crime. To be caught is to vanish. Yet every night some do it anyway. They twist the dials of smuggled Chinese radios, shielded under blankets, hidden in barns or cellars, their hearts pounding as foreign words reach them like messages from another planet. The regime calls these frequencies poison. It claims that the imperialists use them to destroy the people's minds. But the truth is simpler. They reveal a world that contradicts the official dream. A world where electricity runs through the night, where food is plentiful, where leaders are questioned and not worshipped. That knowledge, that glimpse beyond the wall of propaganda, is more dangerous than any weapon. To understand how these forbidden signals survive, we must first understand how North Korea built its fortress of sound. In the early years after the Korean War, Kim Il-sung recognized the power of radio not as entertainment, but as indoctrination. While South Koreans were hearing American jazz and Western news, the North turned its airwaves into a weaponized symphony of control. By 1950, every household was required to own a wire broadcasting system connected directly to state transmitters. It wasn't wireless. It was a literal wire running through neighborhoods and apartment blocks, impossible to intercept or modify. Through these wires, Pyongyang could reach every home, every ear, every child before they even learned to speak. By the 1960s, the system evolved into radio towers that blanketed the nation with government sound. The Ministry of People's Security monitored transmissions from border towns, hunting for any sign of illegal receivers. Agents in plain clothes roamed neighborhoods, listening for the faint buzz of unauthorized frequencies behind paper walls. The punishment for listening to foreign broadcasts was severe: imprisonment, hard labor, sometimes execution. Families could be punished together, their names erased from registries, their homes seized. And yet the forbidden frequencies continued to slip through. From South Korea's mountains, from boats along the coast, from transmitters hidden in Japan, from portable radios smuggled across the Chinese border. These signals became lifelines, fragile threads of truth connecting those trapped inside the regime to the reality outside it. The geography of North Korea makes these transmissions ghost-like. The mountains bend and scatter radio waves, making some valleys dead zones and others secret conduits. In cities like Hisan near the Chinese border, people climb hills at night, holding their radios toward the sky. In rural villages, farmers hide them under haystacks. The risk is immense. The reward, a few minutes of truth. Imagine a young man, perhaps 19, who has never seen a smartphone, never used the internet, never known a world where music isn't about loyalty. One night, he borrows a small Chinese radio from a trader. It's tuned to a South Korean frequency. Suddenly he hears laughter, real laughter, not scripted, not patriotic, but human. He hears a pop song, light and carefree. For a moment, he realizes his country has lied to him all his life. He listens until dawn, until the batteries die, until his heart aches with the weight of forbidden joy. In Pyongyang, the radio stations themselves operate under strict secrecy. The main broadcaster, Korean Central Broadcasting Station, transmits from heavily guarded compounds. Every announcer is handpicked, not just for their voice, but for their ideological purity. They live under surveillance, their scripts reviewed by the propaganda and agitation department. Each word must align with the message of the regime. To deviate is unthinkable. Some announcers have read the same lines for 40 years, their tones unchanged, their smiles rehearsed, their loyalty measured in decades of obedience. But there are other, darker frequencies, the coded ones. Those mysterious number stations that speak in monotone sequences, 5, 6, 9, 1. The purpose: to communicate with North Korean agents abroad. In the dead of night, these broadcasts instruct spies on their missions using numerical ciphers. For outsiders, it's an eerie reminder that the same state that controls every voice inside its borders also sends whispers beyond them. South Korea has intercepted such transmissions for decades. Sometimes the voice is female, sometimes mechanical. Always the same rhythm, the same cold detachment. Even the military runs on its own sealed network of frequencies, layers upon layers of restricted communication. These channels are invisible walls of loyalty and paranoia. In the 1990s famine, when the state began to collapse from within, soldiers used these systems to coordinate border patrols to prevent civilians from crossing into China. The regime feared not only escape, but contamination. That truth might flow in reverse back into the homeland through smuggled radios and foreign voices. In this world, even the air is political. Every sound is filtered. Every silence is calculated. When electricity shortages hit and the official broadcasts fade, people hold their breath, not from fear of the dark, but from fear of what they might hear next. Rumors spread. The leader has died, war is coming, the South has invaded, and then, suddenly, the state voice returns, denying everything, the illusion restored. Yet, across the border, South Korea keeps broadcasting. The frequencies are stronger, more sophisticated, filled with dramas, pop songs, and news bulletins. Some programs speak directly to defectors' families, reading out names and messages from those who escaped. For the regime, this is psychological warfare. For the listener, it's hope. One woman who escaped later described hearing her own name read on a foreign station, a message from her son now in Seoul. She wept silently, knowing that even though she couldn't reply, she had been found. The state's countermeasures are relentless. Massive jamming towers emit white noise to drown out foreign broadcasts. The sky above North Korea hums with interference, invisible nets of static meant to suffocate outside voices. Yet, technology evolves. Smuggled USB drives, SD cards, and digital radios cross the border hidden in sacks of rice or cigarette cartons. The black market of information expands faster than the state can suppress it. Still, the risk remains absolute. In the 2010s, several defectors recalled nightly inspections. Local security officers would burst into homes without warning, checking for modified radios. They could tell by the scratches on the casing, the marks of tampered screws. Families caught were taken away before sunrise. No one asked where. In a nation where even thoughts are monitored, a radio becomes both weapon and confession. There is something deeply haunting about this struggle over sound. In the rest of the world, radio is nostalgia, a fading medium of talk shows and late-night music. But in North Korea, it is life and death. To the regime, it is the pulse of control. To the people, it is the heartbeat of rebellion. Every forbidden frequency carries not just voices, but ghosts, of those who dared to listen, those who were caught, and those who vanished into the static. As dawn breaks over Pyongyang, the city awakens to the same song that has begun every morning for 70 years. Loudspeakers, mounted on lampposts and rooftops, crackle to life. The anthem of the fatherland echoes down empty streets. Children march to school in perfect lines. Factories open their gates. The sound is everywhere, inescapable, eternal. And somewhere, hidden beneath that symphony of obedience, faint and trembling, another signal waits. It's weak, distorted, fading in and out. But for those who can hear it, it carries something that the regime cannot kill. A simple message. The truth still exists, even in the static. The forbidden frequencies of North Korea are not just radio waves. They are the sound of a nation's heartbeat, divided between fear and awakening. In their fragile rhythm, you can hear the past, the control, the desperation, and the faint whisper of freedom, a whisper that no amount of jamming, punishment, or silence can ever truly erase. For now, the air remains divided between what is allowed to be heard and what must never be known. But every night, when the official voices fade and the world turns quiet, somewhere in the shadows, a hand reaches for the dial, and the silence begins to break. The further you go into the heart of North Korea, the clearer the silence becomes. It's a silence engineered, refined, perfected, not by the absence of sound, but by its total control. What you hear, when you hear it, and how you feel when you hear it, all of it is scripted. Beneath the streets of Pyongyang, under layers of concrete and steel, the government operates one of the most secretive broadcasting systems in the world. It is not a network. It is an ecosystem of obedience. The frequencies are mapped like arteries, feeding every city and village with the lifeblood of propaganda. The headquarters of this system lies within a nondescript building near Moranbong district. No signage, no windows, just the faint vibration of transmission towers that rise above it like silent sentinels. Inside, engineers in grey uniforms monitor vast panels of analog equipment. The air smells of dust and machine oil. The walls are soundproofed, not to keep noise out, but to ensure that what is broadcast never leaks before approval. On every desk sits a photograph. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, an unbroken line of divine authority. Every knob turned, every signal sent, is done in their name. No word goes out unvetted. The Ministry of State Security supervises every transmission, ensuring that no unapproved phrase, no stray tone could be misinterpreted as dissent. Before a broadcast airs, it passes through 3 layers of inspection: content, ideology, and emotion. The last one is the strangest. Announcers must recite the same sentence over and over, while officers judge the emotional weight of their voice. Too flat, and it shows weakness. Too warm, and it risks sounding insincere. Only the perfect balance, reverence without humanity, is accepted. Those who pass become the voice of the nation. Their tones are unmistakable, smooth but heavy, cold but precise. You could recognize them anywhere. The voice of a woman who has repeated the same praise for the same man for 30 years, whose own name has become irrelevant. For her, emotion is forbidden, individuality erased. She does not speak, she transmits devotion. Beyond these walls, the state's frequencies spill into every crevice of society. Loudspeakers fixed on poles in rural towns are powered by car batteries during blackouts. Even when the power fails, the sound must not die. Villagers gather around the speakers in winter, wrapped in coats, listening to broadcasts about harvests that never came. They nod in rhythm to slogans about abundance, while their stomachs ache with hunger. The sound is a substitute for reality, and the longer it plays, the less anyone remembers what silence really means. Yet in this machinery of control, cracks begin to form. They appear in whispers, in static, in faint interruptions that no one dares to mention. In some regions near the border, state broadcasts collide with foreign ones. For a few seconds each day, the illusion flickers. The anthem of the revolution fades into the opening tune of a South Korean radio drama. Then it vanishes again, swallowed by interference. Most listeners pretend not to notice, but for a few, That brief glimpse is enough to plant a thought. If this voice exists, what else has been hidden? In the 1990s, when the Great Famine struck, those forbidden frequencies became a lifeline of information. The regime denied the crisis, claiming the people were tightening belts in solidarity with the leader. But across the border, the BBC and Radio Free Asia reported the truth. Millions were starving. Families began to trade whispers about the other side, that foreigners were sending aid, that food could be found in China, that the outside world wasn't the enemy after all. Radios became currency, salvation, rebellion. Those who owned one could hear the truth and decide their fate. Those who didn't starved believing the lie. But the state adapted. It launched Operation Sound Shield, a campaign to eliminate foreign interference once and for all. New jamming towers were built in the mountains, disguised as communication centers. Trucks equipped with mobile interference units roamed rural areas, tracking illegal signals. These vehicles emitted high-frequency noise that rendered foreign broadcasts incomprehensible. The result was a constant, suffocating hiss that filled the airwaves. Inside homes, the static became as familiar as breathing. Still, the human instinct to listen persisted. People began modifying Chinese radios. Traders along the northern border smuggled them in, hidden in bags of rice or sealed inside flashlights. They were small, cheap, and powerful. Some even came pre-tuned to foreign frequencies. Defectors would later describe entire villages sharing a single device, passing it between families at night like contraband gold. In this secret economy of sound, trust was everything. If one person betrayed another, the entire chain collapsed. But in the stillness of the dark, when the jamming faded, foreign voices would return, fragmented but alive. These voices carried stories, news of South Korea's prosperity, of reunions between defectors and lost families, of a world that seemed impossibly free. For many North Koreans, hearing them was like glimpsing sunlight through cracks in a bunker. The realization that everything they'd been told, that Americans were monsters, that South Koreans were slaves, that the leader was divine, might be false. It was an awakening that could never be undone. The regime knows this. That is why the fight for control of the air never ends. It's not about information. It's about belief. The radio isn't merely a machine, it's a battlefield for the human mind. To the state, every frequency that enters the nation without permission is an invasion. To the listener, it's liberation. In the capital, counterintelligence units work tirelessly to maintain that illusion of total control. In Pyongyang's outskirts, there are rooms filled with intercepted transmissions, recordings of foreign broadcasts, catalogued by date and content. Analysts study them not to learn, but to distort. They identify phrases that can be twisted into anti-Western propaganda, claiming that these enemy voices are proof of foreign obsession with North Korea's greatness. The irony is cruel. Even forbidden sound becomes a weapon for the regime. Still, the system isn't perfect. Technology changes faster than paranoia can keep up. Portable digital receivers, Bluetooth transmitters, even old MP3 players repurposed as radios have begun circulating through black markets. Traders in Sinwiju, Hwaryong, and Musan sell them to those who can pay in yuan. Each device carries risk. Possession alone is enough to condemn a person. Yet the demand never stops. People want to hear what the regime denies. Weather forecasts from Seoul, soccer matches, pop music, even gossip from the South Korean entertainment industry. Every word is a form of resistance, every song a small rebellion. There's a particular danger in music. The state fears it more than news. Words can be countered with propaganda, but melody bypasses ideology. A love song from the South can break a heart that no amount of slogans could reach. During the famine, smuggled cassettes of South Korean ballads spread through northern villages. Teenagers would gather secretly to listen, trembling as the voices of unknown singers filled their world. Many said it was the first time they felt alive. Some were caught, reported, imprisoned. Others kept the songs buried in their memories, an invisible treasure that not even the state could confiscate. What few outside the country realize is how sophisticated the state's counter-broadcast system truly is. It doesn't only jam, it deceives. Certain frequencies are deliberately flooded with fake foreign voices, mimic broadcasts designed to confuse listeners. These programs imitate South Korean accents, but subtly distort facts, reinforcing the regime's narrative. They're called phantom frequencies, and they work. Many North Koreans who thought they were hearing truth were, in fact, hearing Pyongyang's imitation of it. To maintain these illusions, the government built secret radio facilities deep in the countryside, places like Mount Myohyang, where military and propaganda engineers collaborate. Locals are forbidden to approach. The official explanation is national defense. In reality, they're listening stations, designed to intercept, manipulate, and rebroadcast information. Every intercepted signal is studied, reconstructed, repackaged. It's propaganda in reverse, the state pretending to be the enemy to keep its people afraid. Meanwhile, the real enemy frequencies continue to evolve. Radio Free Asia now transmits on multiple frequencies simultaneously, switching channels to evade jamming. Some broadcasts are encrypted, bouncing off the ionosphere to penetrate deeper into North Korean territory. South Korean engineers experiment with burst transmissions, short, high-powered signals that deliver messages faster than they can be jammed. It's a war fought in the invisible space between two worlds, a war of patience, precision, and persistence. Inside North Korea, every listener is both soldier and criminal. Those who dare to tune in create their own maps of the air, charting which frequencies are clear at which hours. They learn the patterns of the jammers, the weather's effect on signal strength, the subtle shifts in static that mean freedom is near. This underground knowledge is passed down like folklore, whispered from one trusted ear to another. Yet, even as forbidden voices reach deeper into the country, the psychological barrier remains. Decades of indoctrination have built a reflex of fear. Many who hear foreign broadcasts cannot believe them. They dismiss the truth as enemy lies, because the alternative, that their entire life has been based on deception, is unbearable. Truth in such a world is not only dangerous, it is traumatic. The state counts on that. It relies on disbelief as much as ignorance. When a man hears that South Koreans own cars, he cannot comprehend it. When a woman hears that citizens criticize their leaders freely, she thinks it's a trick. The radio, then, becomes a mirror reflecting how deep control can penetrate, not just through punishment, but through the reshaping of reality itself. Still, in quiet moments, something changes. The frequencies find those who are ready. A border guard hears a foreign song while patrolling the Tumen River. A teacher picks up a static-laced broadcast while adjusting her state radio. A student hears news of an international event the regime never mentioned. These moments accumulate, small ruptures in the fabric of silence. And once the illusion is pierced, it cannot be fully restored. Even within the regime's inner circles, cracks appear. Some mid-level officials, tasked with monitoring foreign frequencies, become addicted to them. They justify it as work, but find themselves listening long after hours. In those voices, they discover something they never expected: empathy. They hear laughter unconnected to ideology, sorrow unconnected to loyalty, and in that they hear themselves. What began as curiosity becomes a quiet crisis of faith. Some defectors say they first doubted the regime not because of famine or punishment or politics, but because of the radio. It's a simple voice from beyond the border, whispering something true enough to shatter everything they'd believed. That is why the regime fears these frequencies more than missiles. Bombs can destroy cities. Truth can destroy obedience. And so the war over the air continues, invisible, endless, relentless. In Pyongyang, the announcers speak. In Seoul, the engineers respond. Between them, millions of ears wait in silence, listening for what is not supposed to exist. In that silence, the revelation grows. The realization that control built on fear cannot silence the invisible forever. The sound may fade, the signal may distort, but somewhere, always, the truth finds its way through. By the time night falls over North Korea, the real struggle begins. Cities go dark, swallowed by the black veil of a country without power, without light, without truth. The hum of the state's loudspeakers fades, the music of obedience dies, and what remains is a void so profound that the air itself seems to whisper secrets. In that silence, far from Pyongyang's glowing monuments and broadcast towers, a few brave souls reach for the forbidden. The act is small, and a flick of a switch, a turn of a dial, but in this world it is rebellion. It is treason. It is hope. Picture a woman in a rural village, her hands rough from working the fields. Her house is little more than wood and clay, the floor lined with straw. Hidden beneath a loose plank is a small Chinese radio wrapped in cloth. She waits until her children are asleep, until the village guards have passed by. Then she listens. At first all she hears is static, endless and grey. But slowly a voice emerges, speaking in clear Korean, with a softness that feels foreign. It is Radio Free Asia, broadcasting a program about the famine. She hears of people dying, of food aid blocked by the regime, of defectors telling their stories from Seoul. She hears the world acknowledging her suffering, something her own government never did. Tears fall silently onto her hands. She knows she cannot tell anyone what she's heard, but she also knows she will never forget. In another home, a young man hides his radio in a rice sack. He's a student, taught to memorize every speech of the leaders, to believe every word he hears on the state network. But tonight his curiosity burns stronger than his fear. He turns the dial carefully, stopping when he catches a rhythm, pop music from the south. It's bright, melodic, impossibly alive. The lyrics speak of love, freedom, longing. He doesn't understand all the words, but he understands the feeling. For the first time he realizes that music can exist without praise, that joy can exist without permission. The song ends and he turns off the radio immediately, terrified of being caught. Yet part of him is forever changed. The descent into this hidden world is not dramatic. It's quiet, personal, invisible. It happens one person at a time, a mother, a student, a soldier, a teacher. The regime's greatest enemy isn't the broadcast itself, but the doubt it plants. Doubt spreads silently like an infection. Once it takes root, it grows until it consumes the mind. A man who doubts cannot worship, a woman who doubts cannot fear, and a nation that doubts cannot obey. But for those who listen, there is always a price. The Ministry of State Security knows how to find them. Every neighborhood has its Inmin ban, a network of watchful eyes. Local women tasked with reporting anything suspicious. A dim light at night, a voice from behind walls, a faint hum of static. When suspicion arises, inspectors arrive. They carry portable detectors designed to sense illegal frequencies. They listen at doors, search under floors, dismantle walls. When they find a hidden radio, they do not ask questions. The punishment is immediate and absolute. In a small town near Hyeryong, an entire family disappeared overnight. Their neighbors said they were taken after someone heard music, not the marching songs of the revolution, but something foreign, something sweet. No one spoke of it again. Their home was reassigned, their names erased from public records, but their absence remained, a warning humming louder than any transmission. Defectors tell stories of those caught with radios, interrogations that last for days, beatings, forced confessions. In some cases, public trials where the accused are paraded before their communities. The charge, ideological contamination. The sentence, years in labor camps, or worse. Yet, the risk does not stop people. Each generation produces new listeners, drawn to the forbidden frequencies like moths to light. Inside those camps, the concept of silence takes on a new meaning. Prisoners work in mines, factories, and fields, surrounded by the endless drone of commands. But even there, rumors circulate of people who once heard foreign voices. Those who survive whisper what they remember, stories of freedom, of families reunited, of food without rationing. In places built to destroy the human spirit, such whispers become the last form of resistance. One former prisoner recalled that among thousands of inmates, a single man had once been a radio engineer. He'd been caught modifying receivers to pick up BBC broadcasts. During forced labor, he would hum the tunes he'd memorized from those forbidden stations, fragments of old South Korean songs, foreign melodies with no words. The guards never recognized them, but the other prisoners did. They didn't know the lyrics, but they knew what they represented. A sound from the outside, a reminder that the world beyond still existed. As the 2000s arrived, technology began to blur the line between control and chaos. Smuggled radios evolved into MP3 players, into USB sticks filled with recordings of foreign programs. The black market of sound became an ecosystem of defiance. Portable devices passed hand to hand like sacred relics. Some were disguised as flashlights or alarms. Others were built with dual modes, one for the state frequencies, one for the forbidden ones. Switch between them, and you switch between realities. In these years, a new type of listener emerged, the shadow network. Groups of citizens, often in border towns, who gathered secretly to record foreign broadcasts. They would listen, memorize, and then retell the stories to others as if they were their own. The information spread orally, turning truth into rumor, rumor into belief. One man might claim he heard from a traveler that in South Korea, people could speak freely. Another would swear he'd seen pictures of supermarkets overflowing with food. These weren't lies. They were fragments of truth transmitted through human memory. The regime understood the danger. It began teaching children to fear radio ghosts. Invisible demons said to whisper lies at night. Propaganda posters warned, "The enemy's voice is poison." In classrooms, teachers staged plays where students pretended to capture traitors who listened to foreign broadcasts. The audience would cheer, but later some of those same students would sneak into fields after sunset, clutching a smuggled radio, eager to meet the ghosts themselves. In Pyongyang, the control was tighter. The capital's residents, the core class, were considered ideologically pure. Their homes were inspected regularly, their loyalty monitored. But even there, leaks occurred. Some foreign diplomats and aid workers left behind shortwave radios. The devices circulated among trusted friends, hidden behind portraits of Kim Il-sung. A few high-ranking officials even used their access to monitor outside broadcasts for their own curiosity. In private, they knew the regime lied, but publicly, they repeated those lies, their voices unwavering. It was survival, not faith. There are recordings, smuggled out by defectors, of secret monitoring sessions. In one, a group of officials listens to a BBC report on North Korea's nuclear program. The room is silent. No one reacts. When the broadcast ends, the leader of the group stands and says, "Everything you just heard is false, but understand it anyway." The statement is not contradiction. It is strategy. The regime knows the outside world's truth, but it cannot afford its people to. So it weaponizes ignorance, even among those who know better. The psychological toll is immense. To live in such a world is to live in a state of permanent dissonance, hearing but not believing, knowing but pretending not to know. Defectors often describe this as the deepest wound. The trauma is not just hunger or fear, but the corrosion of reality itself. When truth becomes a crime, perception becomes a battlefield. And yet, amidst this despair, the forbidden frequencies continue to pulse, sometimes faint, sometimes distorted, but alive. Each signal carries the weight of defiance, a coded message to anyone listening. You are not alone. For every listener who is caught, another takes their place. The air becomes an underground river, flowing unseen beneath the soil of oppression. One defector, a former schoolteacher, described the moment she decided to escape. It wasn't the hunger or the fear. It was a broadcast she heard one winter night. The voice said, "North Korea will one day open to the world." She didn't believe it at first, but the next day she couldn't stop thinking about it. The phrase replayed in her mind for months until it became prophecy. She crossed the frozen Tumen River with nothing but a compass, and that sentence echoing in her head. Later, in Seoul, she learned that the broadcast had been part of a simple human rights campaign, a message of hope transmitted to those trapped inside. For her, it was salvation. The descent of a people into silence is not sudden. It happens slowly, one frequency at a time. The state fills the air with noise until truth becomes indistinguishable from static. But the heart remembers, the ear remembers, and even when fear silences words, sound remains, waiting. In the end, control can never be complete, because the forbidden frequencies are not just in the air. They live in the imagination. They survive in the minds of those who once heard something real and never forgot it. The government can confiscate radios, destroy devices, imprison listeners, but it cannot erase the memory of a voice that once said, "You are free." And so, as the night deepens and the loudspeakers fall silent, there are those who still listen, not for news, not for music, but for proof that somewhere beyond the walls of darkness the world still speaks. Somewhere north of Pyongyang, hidden beneath the slopes of Mount Hyang, lies a facility known only to a few within the Propaganda and Agitation Department. From the air it appears like any other government complex, grey, symmetrical, unremarkable, but underground, it hums with the pulse of a nation's nervous system. Behind steel doors and layers of reinforced concrete, technicians monitor waves of invisible sound that cross the country every second. Their job is not to listen, but to defend, to protect the purity of the air itself. In their world, frequencies are frontiers, and every signal that enters without permission is an act of war. The building is called Station 314. Officially, it doesn't exist. Its workers wear no insignia, its records are sealed. It is said that even among high-ranking officials, few know its true purpose. But defectors who once worked near the site describe it as the epicenter of North Korea's war against the invisible. The regime calls it sound purification. Its mission, to cleanse the air of foreign contamination. Inside, there are rows of analog meters flickering like watchful eyes. A map of the country glows on the wall, overlaid with pulsing lights that mark known intrusion points, places where enemy broadcasts have been detected. Each light represents a voice that slipped through, a truth that evaded the wall of silence. The technicians move quietly between consoles, adjusting dials, calculating interference levels. They are not warriors, but they fight a war nonetheless. A war against what they fear most, information. When a foreign signal is detected, orders come instantly. High-power jammers in nearby provinces activate, flooding the frequency with a roaring static. The interference grows so loud it bleeds into nearby bands, suffocating not just the forbidden voice, but everything around it. To the listener, it sounds like a storm, an ocean of noise that drowns the faint whisper of freedom. Yet sometimes, the storm fails. The geography of North Korea, its mountains, its valleys, its shifting atmospheric layers, betrays the regime. Certain pockets of land become accidental sanctuaries of sound. There, hidden among ridges or near rivers, the forbidden broadcasts survive. Foreign engineers have studied this phenomenon for decades. They call it the shadow corridor, a narrow stretch of terrain where jamming waves weaken and outside signals flow freely. To the regime, it's a leak. To the people, it's a portal. Small groups travel at night to these places, carrying radios wrapped in blankets to muffle the sound. Some climb hills barefoot, holding antennas toward the sky. They call it chasing the wind. And when the signal finally clears, when the hiss fades and a human voice emerges, they fall silent. Some cry. Others simply listen, as if afraid to breathe too loudly and scare the truth away. Beyond these hidden gatherings lies another stranger world, the luxury of secrecy. While the people risk their lives for a few minutes of truth, the elites live surrounded by information. Inside Pyongyang's diplomatic compounds and military academies, imported radios and televisions are common. The children of high-ranking families grow up hearing Western music, watching foreign films, studying English news reports, but they are taught to see it differently, as evidence of the outside world's moral decay. In classrooms, they analyze CNN or BBC clips not to learn, but to condemn. Yet, deep down, many of them are captivated. They hear voices unafraid to question power, unafraid to laugh, unafraid to speak freely. That freedom becomes a ghost that follows them for life. One defector, the son of a party official, once described how his father kept a shortwave radio hidden in his study. At night, when everyone slept, he would lock the door, pull a blanket over the device, and listen to foreign news. He said it was like opening a window in a room that had been sealed for years, the son recalled, but he never told anyone. Even I only learned after he was gone. The father disappeared one day without explanation. Whether he was discovered or silenced by something else, no one ever knew. But in his absence, his radio remained, the only relic of a man who dared to listen. Meanwhile, the outside world has grown more strategic in its attempts to reach those trapped within. What began as simple shortwave transmissions has evolved into a complex network of covert broadcasting. Organizations in South Korea, Japan, and the United States have spent years studying North Korea's radio landscape, mapping its weaknesses, predicting atmospheric conditions to find the perfect time to break through. They call it the dawn window, a brief period before sunrise when the atmosphere amplifies shortwave signals, allowing them to travel farther. During those hours, foreign broadcasters flood the airwaves with news, testimonies, and messages of hope. But even this battle of the air hides deeper layers. Satellite imagery has revealed strange installations across North Korea, circular arrays of antennas, isolated in valleys or deserts, guarded by military fences. Analysts believe they serve dual purposes, jamming and surveillance. Some speculate that the regime doesn't only block foreign signals, it records them, studies them, dissects them. In a twisted irony, North Korea's own engineers may know more about the outside world's broadcasts than the people they are meant to protect from them. Among the most chilling aspects of this system is its psychological reach. The regime has turned the fear of forbidden sound into a religion. Propaganda films show families destroyed by curiosity, a father who listens to enemy voices and brings ruin upon his home, a child who reports his parents and is rewarded with food. These stories serve as moral parables. Obedience equals life, curiosity equals death. Yet, for all its cruelty, the system reveals an unspoken truth that even the most totalitarian regime cannot control curiosity forever. In 2016, a defector smuggled out hundreds of recorded state broadcasts and began comparing them to those from foreign stations. What he found was revealing. Over time, the regime's tone had changed. It was no longer just triumph and devotion. There was anxiety beneath the surface, a sense of siege. The frequency of jamming transmissions had doubled. The state's messages became increasingly defensive, warning citizens about the deceptive music of the South. Some broadcasts even mentioned foreign radio stations by name, a sign that they had become too influential to ignore. In trying to silence them, Pyongyang had inadvertently admitted they existed. But perhaps the most startling revelation came from within. In 2019, a North Korean radio technician defected to China, carrying with him fragments of internal communication logs. They revealed that even within the Ministry of Information, certain employees maintained private archives of intercepted foreign broadcasts, personal collections of forbidden voices. Some were used to study enemy tactics, but others were simply kept for listening. One log entry read, "BBC broadcast received, music after 2100 hours. Beautiful." Another, "Signal from Seoul strong tonight, could not stop listening." These notes reveal something extraordinary, that even among those sworn to defend the regime's silence, human curiosity endures. The airwaves that divide nations are also the threads that connect them. A technician in Pyongyang, a farmer in Hyesan, a soldier on the Tumen River, all listening to the same forbidden sky. The regime, of course, adapts, it always has. In recent years, it has begun experimenting with digital jamming systems, software-defined transmitters capable of changing frequencies automatically. But the outside world evolves faster. New broadcasters use frequency hopping, jumping across bands faster than jammers can follow. The result is a dance of invisibility, a cat-and-mouse game played in the sky. Neither side can fully win. Each night, the battle resets. And then there is something stranger still, a phenomenon that defies explanation. Across the border, amateur radio operators in China and Russia have reported catching unidentified North Korean transmissions, ghost signals broadcasting random tones, musical fragments, or incomprehensible codes. Some believe these are calibration tests for new equipment. Others suspect something deeper, psychological warfare, or even encrypted communication to agents abroad. Whatever the truth, these ghost signals blur the line between control and madness. They are the sound of a regime trying to command the invisible and failing. But while the state's technicians labor to maintain silence, the truth seeps through in ways they can't imagine. Smuggled radios now share the air with USB sticks, loaded with foreign films, South Korean dramas, and audio recordings of world news. The forbidden frequencies have multiplied, not just in the air but in the hearts of those who have heard them. The more the regime jams, the more it exposes its fear. In border towns, people tell stories of nights when the static fades completely, and the air clears as if the sky itself is listening. On those nights, they say, the voices sound closer, no longer foreign, but familiar. Some believe it's the spirits of the dead speaking through the frequencies, ancestors who once listened in secret and were silenced. Others think it's fate, the world calling to them, asking if they're ready to awaken. Whatever they believe, they keep listening. For decades, the regime has tried to make sound its weapon, but in doing so, it has forgotten one truth. Sound travels both ways. Every frequency that leaves Pyongyang carries not only propaganda but evidence of fear, of desperation, of control so fragile it trembles in the wind. Foreign intelligence agencies record these state broadcasts, analyzing the cadence of voices, the pauses between sentences, the shifts in tone. They can tell when something has gone wrong, when the regime is anxious, when its lies begin to crack. The very air that North Korea tries to control betrays it. And so the world watches, not with satellites or spies, but with ears. Somewhere in Seoul, in Tokyo, in Washington, analysts sit in dim rooms, headphones on, listening to the same signals that enslave a nation. They hear the slogans, the hymns, the endless praise, but they also hear something else. The tremor of uncertainty beneath the perfection. A pause too long, a breath too heavy. The faintest hesitation in the voice of a woman who has read the same script for 40 years. That pause is everything. It is the sound of doubt, the smallest crack in the wall of noise. And through it the forbidden frequencies flow, unstoppable, unseen, eternal. Because no matter how high the regime builds its towers, no matter how loud it makes its jammers, the truth rides the wind. Across rivers, over mountains, through the night, it finds its way to the ears of those who need it most. And when they listen, even for a moment, the air itself becomes a promise, a whisper that says, "The silence will not last forever." There is a sound that cannot be jammed, the sound that remains after everything else has been silenced. It exists between words, between breaths, between the static. In North Korea, that sound is everywhere. It lingers in the pauses between patriotic songs, in the sighs of tired announcers, in the hum of power lines that feed the loudspeakers. It's the sound of endurance, quiet, invisible, indestructible. And for those who have lived under the tyranny of controlled sound, it is the one thing that still belongs to them. Imagine walking through Pyongyang at dawn. The streets are empty, wet with condensation. The loudspeakers awaken before the people do. From every lamppost, from every corner, the same song plays, a melody praising the supreme leader. The city glows in muted greys and pale reds. There are no birds, no cars, no conversation, only the broadcast. The words are familiar to everyone. They've been the same for decades. But as they echo through the air, no one truly listens. The sound has become background, an illusion of unity, a wall of noise meant to drown out the unspoken. Yet beneath it, another rhythm grows. The rhythm of quiet resistance. Those who have escaped say that when they finally leave the country, the first thing they notice is the silence. Real silence. A silence without orders, without music, without the state's breath pressing against their ears. They describe it as unbearable at first. Years of conditioning make them restless, waiting for the next command, the next anthem. But then, something changes. That same silence becomes freedom. It becomes space to think, to question, to feel. The absence of noise becomes the rediscovery of self. For many defectors, their first encounter with free sound happens at night, in safe houses or refugee camps. They are given small radios, the same kind they once risked their lives to possess. When they turn them on, the voices they hear are not commands but conversations, news, laughter, interviews, songs about love. It's disorienting. The voices don't demand anything. They simply exist. One defector described crying uncontrollably the first time she heard a weather report from Seoul. It was the most ordinary thing imaginable, but to her it felt sacred. Proof that somewhere, people lived without fear of listening. In that contrast, between the noise of control and the silence of freedom, lies the true story of the forbidden frequencies. It's not just about radios or broadcasts, it's about the human need to hear and be heard. About how the invisible can shape a life more profoundly than the visible. The state can command the air, but it cannot command the longing that lives within it. Every person who has ever turned a dial in the dark, who has ever risked their life to hear a forbidden voice, has participated in a quiet revolution. The irony of North Korea's soundscape is that the regime, in trying to own every frequency, has exposed its own fear. Fear of curiosity, fear of comparison. Fear of a truth so simple that it needs no weapon to spread, only a voice. For decades, the state has poured resources into silencing that voice, into building a wall of sound so thick that reality itself disappears. But control built on fear must always scream because silence terrifies it. Outside the country, engineers still monitor the airwaves, recording every broadcast from Pyongyang. They archive them, study them, decode the tone. What they've noticed is subtle but undeniable. The cracks are widening. The propaganda songs have changed tempo. The news bulletins stutter with uncertainty. Even the once unshakable announcers falter, their voices heavy with exhaustion. They speak with devotion but not conviction. The mask of perfection is slipping, not because of any great rebellion, but because time erodes all performances. And while the state tightens its grip on technology, the world it tries to block keeps getting louder. Satellite signals, Bluetooth frequencies, digital smuggling. New forms of forbidden sound are already inside the country. A USB stick hidden in a bar of soap can carry more truth than 1,000 broadcasts. A shortwave frequency from Seoul can plant a seed stronger than ideology. For a government built on silence, every whisper becomes a threat. But perhaps the greatest transformation is not technological, it's psychological. The act of listening has become a form of faith. To hear the forbidden is to believe that something beyond the regime exists, that truth is real, that freedom is not fantasy. For those inside, it's not about overthrowing power, it's about surviving it. Each listener becomes a silent disciple of another reality, carrying within them the sound of a world they cannot yet touch. In border towns, there are families who still gather secretly at night. They tune the radio low, barely audible, so that even the wind cannot betray them. They don't understand everything they hear, but they listen anyway. It's not the information that matters, it's the act itself. The ritual of defiance. The simple, stubborn belief that truth can be found if you listen closely enough. Some say that one day, when North Korea finally opens, the first thing its people will do is listen, not to speeches, not to commands, but to the world. And when that happens, the silence that has ruled for so long will collapse under the weight of sound. The forbidden frequencies will no longer be forbidden. They'll be history, the echoes of a battle fought in secret, in whispers, in courage. Until then, the air remains divided. The loudspeakers continue to sing, the jammers continue to scream, and the people continue to live between them, trapped in the static of control. But every night, somewhere in the darkness, a hand still reaches for a dial. A signal breaks through. A voice speaks, and in that moment, no matter how brief, the walls of the regime tremble. Because freedom in North Korea doesn't begin with revolution, it begins with a sound that dares to exist, a sound that refuses to die. And long after the regime's towers fall silent, long after the last broadcast fades, that sound will remain in the memories of those who once listened, in the stories of those who escaped, and in the air that no longer belongs to anyone. The forbidden frequencies will become the songs of remembrance, proof that even in the quietest corners of the world, truth finds its way home. For decades, the regime tried to own the air. But the air was never theirs. It belongs to those who breathed it, who dared to listen, who believed that somewhere beyond the static another world was waiting. And it still is. The radios may rust, the towers may crumble, the propaganda may fade, but the frequencies, those invisible threads of truth, will continue to drift across the sky, carrying the memory of every whisper, every song, every heartbeat that refused to be silenced. In the end, the story of the forbidden frequencies is not about power or control. It's about faith, faith in sound, faith in truth, faith in the human need to hear what was never meant to be heard. And if you listen closely even now, somewhere in the static, you can still hear it. Faint, trembling, eternal. The sound of freedom breaking through the noise.